Welcome to Check This Out,
a podcast for kids and their grown-ups where we explore people, places, ponderings, and past moments from history that shape the world around us. My name is Amy Contreras.
And I'm Cece.
Today is part 2 of our episodes on Anne Frank, the amazing girl who lived in hiding with her family from the Nazis during World War II and documented her entire experience in her diary. Anne Frank is part of our newest series on
Women Who Changed the World.
I mentioned at the end of part 1 that we would be having some guests to help us talk about Anne Frank and her experiences. I'll introduce them in a moment. First, let's see what you remember about Anne Frank from part 1 of this episode. You know what that means. It's lightning round time.
Let's see what you got. True or false?
Anne was given her diary as a Hanukkah gift when she was 12 years old.
The answer is false.
Anne was gifted the red and white checkered diary on her 13th birthday in June of 1942. Next question. The Frank family weren't the only Jewish people who hid in the secret annex from the Nazis. Who else was in hiding with them?
A.
A group of 6 Jewish school children.
B.
Another family with 2 adults and 2 kids.
C.
Another family of 3 people as well as a single adult. The answer is C. The Van Pels family moved in with their 17-year-old son, Peter, and a single man named Fritz Pfeffer was also in hiding with the Frank family.
True or false?
The Frank family went into hiding because Otto Frank was summoned to a labor camp in Germany.
The answer is false.
Anne's older sister, Margot, is actually the one who received a summons to go to a labor camp in Germany, and the Franks went into hiding the next day. What country did Anne Frank live in when her family went into hiding? Was it
A.
Germany,
B.
the Netherlands,
C.
France? The answer is B. Anne Frank's family lived in Amsterdam, a city in the Netherlands. Here's our last question. How do we know about the diary of Anne Frank today? A. Her father, Otto Frank, survived World War II and published her writings. B. When Anne was an adult, she sold her diary to a book publisher. Or C. The Nazi forces found her diaries and put them in a museum.
Mama, can I guess? The answer is A.
You're right. Otto Frank, Anne's father, was the only person who hid in the annex that survived World War II. One of the helpers who supported the Frank family and the others while they were in hiding found Anne's diary and kept it safe. It was returned to Otto Frank after the war. Part 1 on Anne Frank covered a lot. Great job refreshing your brain on everything we already talked about. Now, as I promised, to help me with telling you more about Anne Frank and her diary, I have my friends Andrea and Mika here to help us. Thank you, ladies, so much for being with us as we talk about Anne Frank, her diary, her life, and the world she grew up in.
Hi, I'm Andrea.
I'm Mika.
And we are happy to join this podcast. And Mika is happy to be here and read from Anne Frank's diary, as her great-grandparents lived in Hungary and were survivors of the Holocaust.
And Mika, tell us all what grade you're in.
I'm in 3rd grade.
We're so happy you can be here with us. Now, Mika, I'm noticing as we're chatting that you're holding on to a couple of necklaces. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
I have an M from my great-grandma and a Jewish star from my grandma.
Do you wear those all the time?
Yes.
That's so cool that you always have their memory with you.
Mika, you've been kind enough to agree to read some quotes from Anne Frank's diary with our listeners. Would you mind reading us one right now?
Sure. Here is one about her time living under Nazi rule. Anne Frank wrote, I long to ride a bike, dance, whistle, look at the world, feel young, and know that I'm free. And yet, I can't let it show. Just imagine that what would happen if all 8 of us were feeling sorry for ourselves, walking around with discontent clearly visible on our faces. Where would that get us?
Thanks, Mika. Remember, Anne Frank was only 13 when her family moved into the secret annex with the Van Pel's family and Fritz Pfeffer. She experienced growing up in a tight space where all these people were on top of each other and they couldn't even go outside to get fresh air.
What?
Yeah, they didn't go outside the entire time they were in hiding. Anne Frank hoped to be a journalist someday, and after time in the annex, she got the idea that she'd publish a novel about her time in hiding from the Nazis. She began to even rewrite her diary in May of 1944, one that was less private and geared towards eventually publishing it. But her original diary showed us so much of who she was. Mika, will you share another quote from Anne's diary with us?
Writing in a diary is a really strange experience for someone like me. Not only because I've never written anything before, but also because it seems to be that later on, neither I nor anyone else will be interested in a musing of a 13-year-old schoolgirl, June 20th, 1942.
Thanks, Mika. That was even before she moved into the secret annex. I mentioned she wrote about her first love in her diary. While living in the secret annex, young Anne Frank fell in love with the older boy, Peter Van Pels, who was also in hiding with his family. She wrote about him a lot in her diary. Anne Frank sometimes addressed her diary entries to an imaginary friend she called Dear Kitty. Dear Kitty started appearing in her diary in September of 1942, a couple of months after the family had gone into hiding. She liked writing in her diary as though she was writing back and forth with another person. Anne Frank's diary was made into a play that was on Broadway. It won both the Tony Award for Best Play and the Pulitzer Prize for Best Drama. It was also made into a movie in 1959. Anne Frank, her family, the Van Pels, and Fritz Pfeffer didn't step outside one time during the 2 years they were in hiding. Her diary was an outlet to express herself. It was hard to live in such close quarters with her family and the others in the secret annex. Mika, will you share another quote from the diary with us?
I've asked myself again and again whether I wouldn't have been better if we hadn't gone into hiding. If we were dead now and didn't have to go through this misery, especially so others could spare their burden. But we all shrink from this thought. We still love life, but we haven't yet forgotten the voice of nature and keep hoping for everything. May 26, 1944.
This quote was just a couple of months before the Frank family was discovered by the Nazis. Her diary was often hopeful, but also expressed her frustrations and longing to live outside of hiding. She fought with her mom a lot and was frustrated with her often. One of her diary entries said,
Have my parents forgotten that they were young once? Apparently they have. At any rate, they laugh at us when we're serious, and they're serious when we're joking. March 24th, 1944.
Anne Frank's diary is one of the most widely read accounts of the Jewish experience during World War II and the Holocaust. On August 4th, 1944, the family's hiding place was discovered by the Gestapo, the German state secret police. All 8 people in hiding in the secret annex were arrested, along with 2 of the helpers. They were all sent to Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. A quote from Anne's diary shows the fear of being caught the 8 people in the secret annex lived in.
I see the 8 of us in the annex as if we were a patch of blue sky surrounded by menacing black clouds. They loom before us like an impenetrable wall trying to crush us, but not yet able to. I can only cry out and implore, oh, ring, open wide and let us out.
After being sent to Auschwitz concentration camp with her family, in October of 1944, Anne and her sister Margot were moved to the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. While there, both Anne and her sister Margot caught a sickness called typhus in the spring of 1945 and died.
How sad.
Otto Frank, Anne's dad, was the only person who lived in the secret annex that survived the concentration camps and the Holocaust. One of the original secret annex helpers, Miep Geis, found Anne's diary and writings and hid them from the Nazis. When she returned Anne's diary's documents to Otto Frank, she told him, "This is the legacy of your daughter, Anne." One of Anne's final entries in her diary has a quote that I love.
It's a wonder I haven't abandon all my ideas. They seem so absurd and impractical, yet I cling to them because I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart. July 15th, 1944.
Thanks, Mika. Anne Frank changed the world by honestly documenting her experiences as a Jewish teenager under Nazi rule during a time when it was dangerous just to be Jewish. Her observations, dreams, and thoughts strike a chord with lots of people around the world because even when she lived in unbelievable circumstances, she still experienced so many things that we can all understand. While most of us don't have any idea what it's like to live in hiding for over 2 years and never go outside, many of us do understand the things she wrote about, like her first love, fighting with her mom and family, dreams of life outside of wartime, and hopes for the future. I encourage you to check out the Diary of Anne Frank at the library with your grown-up and read about her experiences. Because this episode only scratched the surface of World War II, the Holocaust, and the lives of people impacted by the war, remember, check this out. We encourage you to take learning into your own hands. Be curious and ask questions when you want to learn more about moments from history and seek out additional information and stories. Mika, thanks for helping us with reading some quotes from Anne Frank's diary. But before you go, I have one question for you.
So, Mika, I understand that this podcast is how you learned about Anne Frank. Can you share with us what you've learned about her?
I learned that she went into hiding when she was 13 years old.
Mika and Andrea, it's been so nice being able to work on the Anne Frank podcast with you. Andrea, what has it been like for your family as Mika gets to learn about Anne Frank?
It's an interesting reminder that Anne Frank was just 13 years old when she went into hiding for 2 years, and then at 15 years old was in Auschwitz, because Mika's great-grandparents were about 15 and 17 years old as they were taken from their families in Hungary and brought to the work camps and then eventually to Auschwitz as young teenagers. So it's really eye-opening and an emotional experience to now teach another generation.
That's so amazing. Thank you. And we really appreciate both of you being on the podcast as we've talked about Anne Frank. And for our listeners, you all know we don't just love talking about people, places, past moments from history.
We also love to rhyme.
Mika's going to help us with one last thing and read the poem we wrote for you about Anne Frank.
The secret annex where the Franks had to hide, Anne wrote in her diary with hopes as her guide. She had dreams of peace and the world after war. Her diary pages were filled with thoughts, stories, and yearning for more.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Check This Out podcast for kids. Here at Check This Out, we know there's a lot of information and it can be overwhelming to find accurate information. This podcast is a tool for you to help you do something called citing your sources. As you get older and do projects for school, you'll learn that certain types of websites or information or sources aren't verified or have evidence or documentation to back them up. At Check This Out, we use verified sources to build the stories you hear about. Verified sources are materials or information that have been confirmed for accuracy and credibility. Our sources for this week's episode are Anne Frank House, Encyclopedia Britannica, The Diary of Anne Frank, History.com, and Women'sHistory.org.
Thanks for listening. See you next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.